Good morning, students. I welcome you all to our next academic online class. I hope you all have completed our previous assignments that I have given for the past 2 classes. Try not to postpone your assignments so that it will be a burden for you. Then and there, if you finish, it will be easier, but when you postpone, it will be a burden for you. And not only that, apart from finishing at the last moment, there might be some students who neglect or avoid these sort of assignments or works in your life. So you people have to change. Unless you change yourself, you cannot improve yourself. You cannot take care of your parents in future. You cannot do certain achievements in your future. So try to change yourself to be sincere, punctual, obedient, and faith in God. Okay. Now let us go into the lesson. So we are discussing chapter 2, nutrition in animals. In this topic, so far we have discussed certain important topics like different modes of feeding habits found in various different animals. Then second, we learned the process of nutrition, various stages like ingestion, digestion, absorption, assimilation and digestion. And we learned how nutrition takes place in amoeba, and we are learning nutrition in human beings. We have not completed this topic. We learned only up to stomach. So in today's class, I am going to continue with that nutrition in human beings, followed by the last and final topic of this lesson, that is nutrition in ruminants, that is nutrition in cattle. In nutrition in human beings, we are learning the various parts of the digestive tract, otherwise known as alimentary canal. We have learned so far mouth, the various parts of the mouth like tongue, teeth and salivary glands. Then we learned about the pharynx, esophagus and stomach. So in mouth we have learned many important concepts about teeth and tongue. And when we learned about this pharynx and esophagus, I said glottis and epiglottis, which is very important for our digestive system as well as respiratory system. Actually, the length of the esophagus, I think you should be knowing, the length of the esophagus is about 25 centimeters, almost our long size scale, which is actually 30 centimeter. So minus 5 centimeters. Okay, so we have esophagus some 25 centimeters. Our stomach is approximately 12 inches. The longest part is our small intestine, which is approximately 7.5 meters, whereas large intestine is about 1.5 meters. Okay, so keeping this in mind, we will continue with the topic. Okay. In esophagus, we learned this peristalsis, the movement of the food in form of small balls. Those ball-shaped food moving into that movement is known as peristalsis, and the ball-shaped food is known as bolus. Similarly, with regard to stomach, we learned the presence of hydrochloric acid, which plays a major role and which is essential for our digestion and as well as for protection from germs. We also discussed about about pH and three types of conditions like base, neutral and acid. So actually digestion starts in the mouth by the enzymes produced by the salivary glands and by the crushing of the teeth. Secondly, digestion takes place in the stomach, and finally digestion ends in the first part of the small intestine. Okay, small intestine. So as soon as the food is digested in the stomach, slowly the digested food is pushed into the small intestine. The small intestine comprises of three parts, which includes duodenum, jejunum and ileum. The first part is duodenum, which is a U-shaped structure, and followed by jejunum and ileum. Duodenum is connected to two glands. We call this as exocrine glands. So I will tell about this gland later. Okay, the two glands which includes liver and pancreas. Liver produces bile juice which is sent to the duodenum through a small tract known as bile duct. Similarly, pancreas produces pancreatic juice. Even though it is called as juice, they are none other than enzymes. Enzymes that are involved in digestion, which is sent to the duodenum through a small duct or path or tract known as pancreatic duct. Okay, so bile juice, bile duct, pancreatic juice, so it is known as pancreatic duct. So they are collected in the duodenum, and the digestion ends in the duodenum, the first part of the small intestine. That is, usually we eat food, whatever we eat, it may be chapati or idli or buri or rice, sambar, rasam, all we classified as carbohydrates, proteins, fats, vitamins, minerals and roughage. The complicated forms, okay, so whatever we eat, it will be in the complicated form, which will be broken down into pieces. This is digestion. For example, all sorts of carbohydrates, as we discussed before, we have many different types of complicated carbohydrates like starch, maltose, fructose, etc. All those will be broken down into simpler molecule named as glucose. Similarly, proteins, any form of protein that you consume will be broken down into simpler forms of protein named as amino acids. Maybe I should use the word simplest form. Okay, carbohydrates broken down into the simplest form of carbohydrate, that is glucose. Proteins are broken down into the simplest form of protein named as amino acid, and similarly fats are broken down into simplest forms of fat, namely fatty acids and glycerol. Why they are broken down? Because our intestine, which is involved in the absorption of nutrients, cannot absorb complicated structures. So they should be broken down into simpler forms, and that is digestion. Okay, so in duodenum you come across all the molecules broken down into their own simplest forms, and that is pushed into the second and the third part of the small intestine, that is jejunum and ileum. So in these lateral parts of small intestine, where the inner lining, so actually small intestine and large intestine, they are tubular structure, like esophagus. Okay, so even though they are bent and kept inside our abdomen, the small intestine, the inner lining of the small intestine comprises numerous small finger-like structures known as villi. Some used to pronounce this as villi. Okay, these villi are supplied with numerous blood vessels which are involved. Those blood vessels are involved in the absorption of nutrients from the small intestine. So absorption takes place in small intestine by the villi. Okay, wherever you go, whether you learn about lungs, that is alveoli, where you come across numerous blood vessels are supplemented to this alveoli, and when I inhale, actually this oxygen are taken or carried by this so-called blood vessels. Similarly, here in small intestine also, this villi which is involved in the absorption. The absorption actually takes place through the blood vessels. So we have this capillaries, blood capillaries, which are involved in absorption of oxygen and also throwing the carbon dioxide outside. So both work. So that's why it is called as exchange of gases. The respiration is known as exchange of gases, where oxygen is taken and the remaining waste gas are removed, especially carbon dioxide. Similarly here, with regard to digestion, where nutrients are absorbed. Again, in large intestine, water is absorbed. Excess water is absorbed. That's why the feces is a solid waste. Every morning we go for nature's second call, where the feces is said to be called as a solid waste. You have liquid waste separately, which is sent out in the form of urine. That takes place in liver and the kidney. Okay, so even there, here absorption by blood vessels like that, even in liver and kidneys, where the nitrogenous waste helps in the removal or sending out or excretion of the liquid waste along with water. Okay, so that we will study later in some other topic. So we will stick on to digestion. The next is large intestine, where excess water is reabsorbed. And finally, the solid waste goes to the rectum, collected in the rectum and sent out through anus. In humans, the digestion is called as extracellular digestion. So this is based on the digestion taking place inside the cell or outside the cell. That is, in case of unicellular animals, we might have learned before, where the nutrition takes place inside the cell. The animal is a single-celled organism, so nutrition takes place inside the cell, and so they are known as intracellular. Intra means inside. They are known as intracellular digestion, whereas in human beings and various other multicellular animals, even though the digestion takes place inside the body, but it is not inside the cell. And so this kind of nutrition is known as extracellular digestion. Extra means outside. Okay, so here the meaning is different. So extra means outside, intra means inside. Okay, so intracellular digestion in case of unicellular animals and extracellular digestion in case of multicellular animals. Then with regard to this food, we come across certain problems related to food. One, adulteration. That is, in food, certain unwanted substances are added to cheat the consumer or due to some selfish needs. For example, certain wood pieces, fine particles of wood are added in tea powders. Second, brick powders that are used or added or adulterated in chili powders. Similarly, adding water in milk. So etc. So like that we come across adulteration, actually, which has been limited to a much extent presently. So this is one issue we face because of food. Second issue with regard to food is junk foods with more oil or more carbohydrates or more chemicals, etc. Then third is contamination. That is, in some cases the food will be occupied by some germs, microorganisms, and it spoils the food spoilage. So let me concentrate on this food spoilage. Okay, so when a food is spoiled, especially by a microorganism, which results in certain disorders to the one who consumes that food, with or without the knowledge. Okay, so spoiled food should not be consumed. It may be by bacteria or fungus or any other microorganism. When a food is spoiled, it should be avoided. Even in fruits, you come across sometimes a part of the fruit or part of the vegetable being spoiled by some microorganisms. So we have to avoid those kinds of fruits or those kinds of foods. Okay, if we consume a spoiled food or a contaminated food, that results in mainly two disorders. One is diarrhea and dysentery. What is diarrhea? A person who suffers diarrhea mainly has loose motion with severe abdominal pain, stomachache. Okay, So loose motion where this microorganism, when it enters inside, it affects your digestive cells, that is the cells that are found in the digestive tract, and thereby water from your cells comes out along with the waste, undigested or improperly digested food along with the more excess water comes out, and this is known as loose motion. Dysentery, when loose motion occurs along with the blood, maybe this dysentery can also be called as bloody diarrhea, that is loose motion along with the blood, and so they are known as bloody diarrhea. There are two kinds of dysentery, one caused by amoeba and other caused by bacteria. So the dysentery that is caused by amoeba is known as amoebic dysentery, and the dysentery that is caused by bacteria, a kind of bacteria known as bacillus, that is like chalk piece or a pen or pencil, rod shaped bacteria, they are known as bacillus, and if they cause a dysentery, they are known as bacillary dysentery. Okay, so two types, amoebic dysentery and bacillary dysentery. So we should be very careful with all these kinds of problems, and we should see to that we conserve the food safely. When you face this diarrhea, apart from consuming some antibiotics to kill the germs and to stop the infection, we can go for our self remedy. That is, when a person suffers loose motion, since more water is lost along with the minerals, the person becomes more tired. In that case, there is a therapy known as oral rehydration, ORS, which is actually oral rehydration solution, which is available in medical shops, that should be consumed by the person who suffers loose motion. Okay, because this oral rehydration will not cure the disease, but it helps the person to be active to some extent. Since because of loose motion he will be tired, and that this oral rehydration helps the person to be stable to some extent. If you are not able to go outside, in that case, if you are at home, just take a glass of water with 1 teaspoon of salt and another teaspoon of sugar, mix it and drink it. This is the simple way of making that person stable, else the person will collapse. The last and final topic of this lesson is nutrition in ruminants. Generally, any animal or most of the animals that you come across in this world, we don't have the capacity to digest cellulose. That is, we don't have an enzyme named cellulase to digest the cellulose molecule. What is cellulose? You might have learned in lower classes, the plant cell comprises of cell wall. That is the main difference between a plant cell and an animal cell. A plant cell has an outer cell wall which is not found in animal cell. That's why if you touch a root or bark or a leaf of a plant, it will be stable. That is, it will be rigid. But it is not so in case of humans. You have a flexibility, and that is because of the absence of cell wall. Maybe in skeletal system we have this presence of calcium which gives that rigidity, but when you touch a skin or a muscle or any organ inside, it will be flexible, it will be soft, and that is mainly because of the absence of cell wall. Right. In case of plants, the cell wall is made up of cellulose, a chemical, a carbohydrate named as cellulose. When we are consuming a vegetable or a fruit, it's like a packet of food, which this outer packet is known as cellulose or cell wall. Okay, the outer packet is cell wall, which is made up of cellulose. Just imagine, can you just eat the food without opening the packet? No. Okay, so similarly, when you are consuming a vegetable or a fruit, we don't have the enzyme to open the cell wall of that plant part. And if you are not opening the cell wall or the packet of the cells, you cannot get the nutrients that is found inside the cell found in the fruits or vegetables. So, which means it's a mere waste in eating those vegetables and fruits. So, in that case, there comes our microorganisms that are found in our body, in our intestine or colon region, that is large intestine, which helps in the digestion of this cellulose. In case of cattle like cow, goat, sheep, deer, etc., they have a special mode of nutrition or digestion. First of all, they also don't have the capacity to digest cellulose, that is, they cannot digest plants. Second is they are herbivorous in nature. At least we people, we are omnivorous. We eat both flesh as well as plants. But in case of ruminants, that is cattle, we come across those animals are purely vegetarians, purely herbivorous in nature. They consume only plants and they cannot digest cellulose. So in that case, it is a mere waste in eating the plants. So there comes a certain special adaptations in those animals gifted by God. That is, one, their digestive tract, that is the stomach, especially the stomach, is divided into 4 chambers. Like how we human beings or mammals have a 4-chambered heart, right auricle, left auricle, right ventricle, left ventricle, like that. In case of cattle, there are 4 chambers, which includes rumen, reticulum, omasum and abomasum. So these are the 4 chambers of the stomach in cattle. So when the cattle eats the food first enters into rumen. Then from rumen it goes to the reticulum, then to omasum and abomasum. First of all, in rumen, the rumen comprises of various microorganisms. They are known as cellulose degrading bacteria or cellulose degrading microorganisms, which involved in the degradation or breaking down of cellulose. So these microorganisms, they have an enzyme known as cellulase, which is involved in the breakdown of cellulose into simpler molecules. And once the cellulose is broken down, which means it is easy for the animal to intake the nutrients that are found inside the cell. From this rumen, the food enters into the next chambers, that is reticulum. From this reticulum, the food is collected to the mouth. You might have seen many cattle, they used to chew the food in their mouth. Actually, they consume the food, they swallow the food fastly, and somewhere they go sit in a shady place or somewhere and they chew. This is none other than from the second chamber, the digest, that is the food that is digested by the bacteria, which goes to the second chamber, reticulum, and from the reticulum the food is collected to the mouth and they start to chew. The partially digested food, that is the digested food which is digested by the microorganisms, is actually known as cud. So this cud is actually brought to the mouth and the animals start to chew. This process, this chewing process, is actually known as rumination, and because of this, these animals are known as ruminants. Even though they are called as cattle, they are known as ruminants because of rumination. And once when they chew in their mouth, again they swallow. Now the food enters into the third chamber, that is omasum, where digestion of the cattle or of the ruminant takes place. And from omasum it goes to the abomasum, and here the digestion ends. So this is the last chamber of the stomach. Okay, rumen, reticulum, omasum and abomasum. In rumen, the digestion of food takes place by bacteria. Then in reticulum, again the food is collected to the mouth, chewed and again sent. So you call that as cud, and the process is rumination, and because of that the cattle are known as ruminants. From reticulum, the food goes to omasum and abomasum, where the food is completely digested, and now the food is taken to the intestine for absorption. A few words about this bacteria. This cellulose degrading bacteria, when they digest or degrade cellulose, they produce a byproduct known as methane. I hope you by this time have heard in many places about this methane gas. So this methane gas is a gas that is actually produced by nature, maybe produced under the soil, deep into the soil, And secondly, in cattle you come across the methane gas produced by the cellulose degrading bacteria. Since methane gas is produced, these microorganisms are known as methanogenic bacteria. And because of this reason, we use this in the production of methane gas outside the body of the cattle. That is, you come across this cow dung. In this cow dung, where you come across partially digested food, that is, even though it is called as waste, actually in this world we don't have something that is called as waste. Okay, whatever you come across as waste which is useful for something or someone, so only thing is that we should find the way how to reuse or recycle. That's it. Okay, right. So this cow dung comprises of various plant tissues, that is whatever the cattle has eaten, a leaf worm or a fruit or a bark of the tree, etc. And also it comprises various microorganisms, that is cellulose degrading microorganisms, which I call it as methanogenic bacteria. Have you heard of this term gobar gas? I hope many would have heard this term gobar gas. What is gobar gas? Actually, it's a process of collecting all the cow dungs, more cow dungs from a particular site, and dumping in a container, maybe a septic tank or something, and daily sprinkling some water and mixing. So whatever the process that took place inside the cattle, inside the stomach of the cattle, takes place inside the container. That is, that cow dung comprises of the plant parts along with the cellulose degrading bacteria. So this cellulose degrading bacteria inside the container starts to degrade the cellulose of the plant part or of the cow dung, and thereby produces methane gas. This methane gas is actually known as gobar gas. So this methane gas, the chemical formula of methane is CH3 or CH4, which is equal to LPG, that is liquefied petroleum gas, the cylinders that we are using in our homes. Okay, so that is, methane gas can be used for cooking. So it's not that cow dung only should be used. There are many peoples in local who are maintaining this by using the vegetable waste. So only thing is that we need the cellulose degrading bacteria. So the vegetable wastes are dumped in a container. The process takes place, cellulose degradation takes place, and methane gas is produced, which is connected to the home or kitchen, which this methane gas can be used for cooking. At the same time, methane gas or LPG gas, and there are many gases which are also harmful to our environment. That is, this methane gas along with many other gases, let me list out later, are called as greenhouse gases because they cause greenhouse effect. Okay, gases like methane, carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, CFC, HFC, that is which is produced from refrigerators or ACs, okay, chlorofluorocarbon and hydrofluorocarbon, and along with that to some extent water vapor, ozone, all these are examples of greenhouse gases which causes greenhouse effect. What is greenhouse effect? When these gases are found in the atmosphere, in air, they have the ability to absorb the heat that comes from the sun, and they don't leave out, and this heat causes an effect known as global warming. That is, when there is more heat in the atmosphere, the temperature in the earth or the temperature in the atmosphere start to rise slowly, and this is known as global warming. And this global warming results in various issues like melting of ice caps, and because of that seawater rising and that seawater entering into the land surface, etc. So even though this gas is useful, it also has some harmful effects. I just want you to know about this. Okay, so with this our lesson ends. I hope you have gone through the class and you have observed keenly the various concepts. So if you have book, go through the book, prepare well and attend the online test. Okay, assignment session. Kindly write down these question answers that is displayed in the screen in your class, in your notebook. neatly and legibly. Okay, that is your assignment for today. So always we are trying to give some simpler assignments, so try to finish regularly. Okay, don't postpone, and try to write neatly as much as possible. Okay, all the best. Thank you. God bless you.